Good afternoon, good people. Let's try that again. Good afternoon, good people.
Good afternoon.
There we go, there we go. Welcome aboard the accident. For those that are visiting, welcome to Bermuda. This is our famous homes and hideaways tour. But before we get going, to take care of a bit of housekeeping, to let you know that we do have bathrooms on board. For us up top, we have to go downstairs at the front of the boat, down the steps, left or right, makes no difference which one you use. All we ask is that you please read carefully of what you can and cannot put into our hands. That's as delicate as I can say that. And secondly, and more importantly, in the event that in the Landis, my name is Robert, and I will be your guide for the afternoon. Say hi to Robert.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, how you guys doing? Yeah. But anyway, it's going to take us about 10 minutes just to get across the sound to get into the meat of the tour. But in the meantime, I'd just like to give you a brief history of this wonderful place that we call home. You are in our Royal Naval Dockyard. This was actually set up after the American War of Independence, and due to the fact that Britain didn't fare too well in that war, they came here to set up their naval base right here in the Royal Naval Dockyard, basically to keep an eye on the Americans, and also to keep an eye, he said, oh yes, and also to keep an eye on our good neighbors down there in the Caribbean. Now, this was for many years a major economic hub right here. All the trades would basically come here into the dockyard to ply their trade in terms of shipbuilding and carpenters and what have you. But then once the British pulled out, it sort of lay dormant for a while, for over 20 years, I want to say. But then they pumped a bunch of cash in here, and now it has become one of our major tourist attractions. So if you get out there into the museum, you can actually go swim with the dolphins and stuff like that. There's a few beaches around, and a good time is had by all. Now, some of you may or may not know that 2 years ago, Bermuda hosted the America's Cup. Yeah. Well, that took place right here in Dockyard, and as we just come around the corner, this structure you see straight ahead of us, that will actually be on our right once Jamie turns, that is known as Cross Island, and that was not here 5-6 years ago. They actually purposely built that for the America's Cup. That was the America's Cup Village, as a matter of fact, and all the races took place on the other side in the Sound. Now, we had a report that came up pertaining to America's Cup, and we had well over 300 yachts that visited the island just for that race. And of those 300 yachts, we had close to 100 of the mega yachts. It was very, very, very exciting time that we had here. And for the very first time in America's Cup history, they put together an America's Cup band. And believe it or not, yours truly was chosen as the musical director for that. Yes, thank you very much. Now, class, if you're good, we might give you a little treat. Yeah, we might give you a little treat if you're good. I don't know what the troublemaker up front. He seems like he's going to be a troublemaker. But if you're good, yeah, we'll give you a little something a little later on. But nonetheless, like I said, we are in Dockyard. This is the most western part of the island that you could go. And as you just gaze over straight ahead, just slightly to the left, the furthest landmass you see over there, that is known as St. George's, and that is the furthest east you can go. And here's our captain right here. It's Captain Jamie. Yeah.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Yes, quite the guy. But yeah, and that is the furthest east you can go. Now, Bermuda is only 21 square miles. That is it, 21 square miles. We have a population of 63,000. Now, I know a lot of people may say, oh, that's not a lot of people, but it really is, considering you were cramped into 21 square miles, yeah? And, but now some of you may have told your friends and family that you were coming to the island of Bermuda. If you would have said that, you would have been wrong. Bermuda is not an island. We're actually made up of 118 There are 7 main islands. So therefore, we're not an island, but we are an, I heard it, archipelago. Yes, well done. Yeah, okay, you can think of the darker storms. Yeah, that's not affecting you, yes. An archipelago. Now, some people think that we are part of the Caribbean. We are not. However, this is the most northern spot in the world where you can find coral reefs. As a matter of fact, we can find coral reefs close to 6 miles to our north. So if you're into snorkeling, there's quite a few snorkeling excursions that lead from where we just left there in Dockyard. Now, our nearest landmass is a place called Cape Hatteras, which is in... No, you don't know? You know it? You don't know? Have you ever heard of Cape Hatteras? You have? Cape Hatteras is in North Carolina. Dark and stormy. We didn't get that one. You didn't get that one? It was on the tip of your tongue, okay? You know it's in the Carolina? Yeah, on the East Coast. Yes, yes. That's good. That's good. It's Cape Hatteras, and that's some 580 miles to our northwest. Now, as you know, that we here in Bermuda, we are British. We are British. However, we were actually discovered by the Spanish, and that was in 1503. Actually, I'm not quite sure the years, either 1503 or 1505. And the gentleman that discovered us, his name is Juan de Bermudez, and that's actually how we get our name from him. Yeah. Now, it wasn't until some 100 years later that we were actually colonized. But in between that time, many sailors would actually leave livestock on the island in case of an emergency to breed, and so that they could have provisions. And that actually led to two of our nicknames, because the majority of the animals that they left on the island to breed were hogs or pigs. So we get our nickname, the Bermuda Hogs. And we even have that on our currency, on our one set. And even if, there's even a popular pub in Hamilton called the Hog Penny. It bears the same name. And it also led to another nickname, and it actually came from the sailors that did not stop by. And the reason they didn't stop by is because those same animals were making these eerie noises. So they thought that the island was haunted, yes, that evil spirits lived here, that the devil, were that everybody back in the boat were heading back to England, so off they left. But fortunately, they ran into a ship that was actually bringing supplies to Jamestown, Virginia, so they turned around. And so that's Bermuda's very small contribution into helping colonize America. Yeah. Now, as you get around on the island, you're going to notice that we here in Bermuda, we drive on the correct side of the road. Yes, we drive on the left, yes, which is the correct side to drive on. Americans drive on the right, yes. And I asked our guest Gina how it came to be why the various countries drive on the various sides of the road. The left-hand side is stemmed from when we ride around on horses for the most part. Most men would carry swords for protection. Most men were right-handed. It was easier for themselves to protect, protect themselves, if they were on the left side of the path. Right-hand side, America had a sort of hand to do that. And horses again, when you ride around on stagecoaches, full stagecoaches had seats. Stagecoaches pulled by 3 horses, one in the front and 2 in the rear. The rider, he or she would only ride on the left rear horse. It was much easier to control the stagecoach if they were on the right side of the path. Yeah. Interesting, yeah. Very interesting, yeah. Anyway, as we come along here, this area you see here to your left, it is known as Spanish Point, and it gets its name from when the British actually finally did settle here. They came into this area, and they did this, they followed a lot of Spanish trades, and they realized that the Spanish had been hanging out, so it gets its name, Spanish Point. And we had another sailor in 1603. His name was Diego Ramirez, Spanish sailor. He was actually sailing around the island, and he actually drew the very first map of Bermuda. And if you Google that, it's pretty impressive. When you think of the technology of that year in 1603, it's pretty accurate. That was pretty accurate. But while he was sailing around the island, he actually struck his rudder, and he went into that area over there, Spanish Point, to fix it. Well, he sent one of his crew members on shore to get lumber, and when he got on shore, he started wailing, screaming, and howling. So what did the other crew members think? He was being attacked by those evil spirits. House. When you look at the windows on the second floor, they're built very close to the roof, and that was done to help with ventilation. Now, when I was first doing this tour, I noticed, and I never noticed before, that a lot of houses in Bermuda have chimneys. Now, like, why do you have chimneys? Because we don't get that code that we require to burn our fireplace for warmth. And it was explained to me that back in the day, those chimneys were used for cooking. Yeah, so it makes sense. Yeah, and now that tradition has continued. Yeah, so as you even gaze up on the hill there, you'll see a lot of those homes there have chimneys. Yeah. Oh, yeah, to the left, the turtle, right in the water there, to your left. Yeah. Yeah, just poking his head up here. Yeah.
What's the range
Average 56 inches, 54, 56.
54 inches?
Yeah, average, yeah. And we're actually, we're fortunate this year. We're sort of ahead of it, as they say here today. Yeah, we're like about 2-3 inches ahead of you. Yeah. Now, as you can appreciate, us being 21 square miles, we don't have a lot of natural resources. So the early settlers had to think of interesting ways of making money. So one of those ways was a thing called privateering. Privateering. Now, if you're not familiar with privateering, privateering is basically legal pirates. Legal pirates. And what they would do on our South Shore side, mostly, that's where most of our coral reefs are, they would actually light beacons along that, and that would lure ships to come close. Those ships would get shipwrecked, and they would either row there, sail out there, and if it was not nailed down, they took it. And I'm talking from money, food, gold, even slaves. They took that and they gave that to the government, and the government would pay them. So when you get around the island, you hear names like the Trimminghams, you hear names like the Butterfields, the Coxes, the Friths. Well, that's how their ancestors made their money, through privateering. And we say all of that because out there on the hill, the yellow house with the tinted windows, that is the home of the Butterfield family, one of their homes. And that is, they are the owners of Bermuda's very first bank. Our very first bank. Now, as you can appreciate, us, that's a big tunnel now. Jeez, that's a big tunnel. Yeah, right there. You can see it. Oh, okay, yeah. Now, as you can appreciate, us being surrounded by water, we have a lot of maritime activity. We have a race that occurs every year between Newport, Rhode Island, and Bermuda, which is called the Newport, Rhode Island Bermuda Yacht Race. And well, back in 1980, a gentleman sailed in that race, almost lost his life, was lashed with high winds for about 6 hours, but made it safely to the island. And when the rest of the crew was ready to go home, he decided that he was going to stay here in Bermuda. And in this beige house right in front of us, it is known as Undercliff. It has the blue chairs in front. Well, that is where he wrote his last album, unfortunately. His last album was called Double Fantasy, and that gentleman's name was John Lennon. Yes, the beige house that we're coming across right now, yeah. And he got the name from for the album Double Fantasy from a flower that he saw here in our botanical gardens called the Freesia flower. Freesia flower. And if you have the opportunity to go to the botanical gardens, there's actually a statue of his son, Sean, there. Who was actually on that voyage with him. But that is the house right there that we're going across there. And up until that point, he had recorded music for about 5 years, and the life-altering event, I would say, when he was sailing across, changed his mind, and so he got back into writing again. Now, the area we're coming into now, on this tour, we call it Billionaires Row. Now, we do have a Billionaires Row, but that's in a place called Tucker's Town. That's where the likes of Ross Perot, Mayor Bloomberg, they own homes there. Now, we didn't take too kindly to Mr. Perot when he first bought his home here back in the late 80s. Why? Because he could not get his yacht into a certain area. What did he do? He blew up coral reefs to get access. Yes, he did. And very arrogantly so, and just paid the fine, and we didn't take too kind to him at all, not at all. But and I would say that on the tour, and I would say to Captain Jamie, I said to him one time, like, why would anybody do that? Why? And Captain Jamie told me a saying that I had never ever heard of before. He said, Robert, the reason he did that, because it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Yeah, I had never heard that. You heard that before? No. Yeah, I never heard that, yeah. But I started thinking, though, would that work with my wife? Probably not. Probably not. Yeah, so yeah, never heard that, yeah. But this area is actually called Fairylands, yeah. Oh, very calm. Okay, looking out for the boat down here.
I throw more water in here.
That's right. How you doing?
Hey guys.
All righty. Yeah, right. Cool. Yeah. Well, the first house here, this orange one here to the left, that is known as a Longside, and it's owned by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Conyers. He's actually an architect, and this house has actually won awards for its architecture. Again, employing old Bermuda architectural techniques. Now, you see that semicircle above the windows? They look like eyebrows. What do we call them here in Bermuda? Eyebrows. Yes, I tell you, we don't stay up all night, baby. Eyebrows. Yes, we don't. Yes, we do not stay up all night. Eyebrows. They look like eyebrows. Let's call them eyebrows. But once upon a time, they actually had a function, and that was to prevent rain from coming into the home. Yeah. And this other structure you see here, right behind the boat here, sort of triangular, like pyramid sort of shaped thing, that is known as a buttery. A buttery. And that too. Oh, Ooh, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's known as a buttery, and that too, once upon a time, had a function. Half of it would have been built below ground, and needless to say, the other half above ground, and that's where the early settlers would store their perishables. So when you get around the island, you're going to see a structure that looks like that, and you see this one, hey, that's a buttery. It's a buttery, yeah. And they all look just like that. Come to a pinnacle and a little bubble on the top, yeah. I don't want to tell you guys, but we stood up because the boat behind us, he ran aground. Yeah, he got off though. He got off. Yeah. Yeah. And he used to be our captain. Just joking. Yes, ma'am. Those trees there. I'm not sure if they're cypress. I just call them tree. Yeah, I call them tree. Yeah, I don't think they're cypress. Some sort of palm tree in it, Jay. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So the short one?
yeah.
Yeah.
What are they? What the lady said? What you say they are? Sago palms. There you go. Yeah. There you go. Now the blue house you see here, that is owned by the Gray family. They came to fame. They started a business called Orbis Investments. Now one of the nice things I like about that home, as you see, there's two gentlemen on the second floor. The one that is made of, they have to do that you have to do that basically every year to keep that looking like that. Now Bermuda cedar is very instrumental, or was very instrumental, in the survival of our early settlers. Not just for the wood, but it produced these berries that they would actually boil up and drink. Unfortunately, in the early 40s, when the Americans came here to build their bases, unintentionally of course, came with them a little tick, a little mite, and by 1970 had wiped out over 90% of our cedar trees. Yeah. But they are protected now. They are protected now, so you cannot just go cut the trees down and anything like that. Now as we come into the cove here, not this pink one that we're going across, but the one nestled up there in the corner with the sort of grayish trim, that is known as Mayfair. Mayfair, owned by Bermuda's first self-made millionaire. His name was Mr. Fernand Perry. He had a chain of stores here in Bermuda called the Piggly Wiggly. Yes, you remember, you've heard of the Piggly Wigglies, yeah? The Piggly, yeah, down south, yeah. If you get around the island and you see stores called the Marketplace, well, they were the former Piggly Wigglies, yeah. And he was very instrumental in the development of our healthcare laws here in Bermuda, so much so that there's a floor named after him at our hospital known as the Perry Ward. And he was also the longtime owner and CEO of our television and radio station, BBC, yeah. Now, class, I want you to go to the left of that. You're going to see a yellow house, and I want you to listen carefully. That belonged to his first wife. His first wife, yes? Now, I asked this question to all our guests, and we get hundreds of answers. We get hundreds of answers, but we get a very popular answer. And I asked this question, and I'm not looking for anyone in particular. Who did he marry to become his second wife? He married his maid. Well done. This is the nanny, yeah. Well done, correct, yeah. But that's not the most popular answer we get. You wouldn't believe what the most popular answer we get on this tour. Her sister. Yeah, that is the most popular answer we get on this tour. Her sister. But all jokes aside, she actually got that after they got divorced. Unfortunately, they lost a son, and she got very depressed, needless to say. And he, being the typical male, could not deal with her depression. So he divorced and went off to nanny. But still very much loved his wife, and I gave that to her, like I said, after they got divorced. Yeah. But he was quite the, as they say, philanthropist. Yeah. No, that's philanthropist. He gave away a lot of money. Yeah. And he has a company that goes by the same name, Mayfair, and they do a lot of charity work as well. Yeah. We're looking at all the turtles. Yeah, it's been a while. Oh, once in a while. Once in a while. Okay. Yeah, philander. Yeah. Well, I'll be honest, because I always have a hard time saying philanthropist, and I was having a hard time getting it up one time on the tour, and a lady said philanthropist. No, that's not the word, but I get what you're saying. Yeah. But anyway, as we turn our attention to the left, on the orange property there, you're going to see that shiny generator. Well, to the right of that, you're going to see that deep green tree. Well, that's an example of our cedar tree. Just to give you an example of our cedar tree. Now, unfortunately, when they'll be decimated between 1940 and 70, the government brought in another tree to replace it. And on the same property, if you go all the way to the right there, right on the end, on the point there, that tree that's standing tall, that is the Casuarina tree. That's what they brought to replace it. But unfortunately, its roots grow sideways. So a lot of times when we have high winds or especially hurricanes, a lot of them topple over very easily. But they've actually started a reforestation program in a place called Cooper's Island here. That's actually where NASA has its tracking station in Bermuda. And they're replacing all the Casuarina trees there with the strain of cedar tree that survived the blight between 1940 and 1970. Hey, look at the dock. That's like, that dock must live here. That's like the second time seeing it here. Now, as I said to you that we are British, but we are self-governing. As a matter of fact, Bermuda, is the oldest self-governing overseas territory. However, the city of Hamilton and the town of St. George's, they have their own corporations. So under the watchful eye of the government, they sort of run their own affairs. And we say all of that because as we're exiting Fairylands here, the greenhouse you see there to your right, that was owned by the very first black mayor of the Corporation of Hamilton, and his name is Mr. Cecil Dismont. Now I know you're looking at the house and you're saying, Robert, that house needs a little TLC. Yeah, it does. There's a story behind that. Unfortunately, Mr. Dismont died well over 20 years ago. And believe it or not, the family is still trying to work it out. Yes. But we think it's moving in the right direction. Why? Because there used to be a white boat up until 2 years ago that was at that dock and that had not moved since he died. But it's no longer there, so we're thinking, hey, progress. But as I said to you, we are self-governing Bermuda, but we do have a governor that is appointed to us by Her Majesty the Queen, but he's only responsible for three things. He's responsible for external affairs, he's responsible for our police department, and he's responsible for our regiment. Yes, believe it or not, we have armed forces, so to speak, here. And up until 2 years ago, we still had conscription. And basically, if you were male, and once you turned 18, if your name was called, you had to serve 3 years in the Bermuda Regiment. But they got rid of that. Well, the dark period in our history in 1973, our then Governor Sir Richard Sharples, he was assassinated. They killed him, they killed his bodyguard, they even killed the dog. Yes. So why? I didn't know Shaggy. But well, it was a little controversy because the two gentlemen that were found guilty of committing those murders were executed in 1977. And Bermuda actually rioted for 4 days. They burnt down a lot of stores in Hamilton. The biggest crime, they burnt down the Gosling Liquor Warehouse. That's the biggest one, yeah. They burnt that down. And we were under curfew for 2 weeks. We had to be in our homes by 6 p.m. Well, the controversy, as they say, is that reports were done many years later, and they all came to the same conclusion for different reasons, mind you, that although these guys were by no stretch of the imagination were they Boy Scouts, because actually one of them actually admitted to killing the police commissioner a few months before that. But anyway, that these two guys could not have committed those murders. Could not have committed those particular murders. And I say that because the pink house you see there to your left, with all the palm trees in front, that is known as Tideway, and that was the private residence of our then governor, Sir Richard Sharples. As a matter of fact, I believe his son and family still live there today. Yeah. Now, as we swing back to the right there, that island you see there, that is known as Anchor's Island. Once upon a time, ammunition depot for the British Royal Navy, and as a matter of fact, the trolley system that used to carry the ammunition around is actually still on the island. And this island was not marked on any map back then. It's not marked on any map. It's the sneaky British trying to be sneaky here. Well, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember a movie that was released in 1955. It starred Esther Williams, and it was called $1 Million Mermaid. Well, that movie was actually based on a movie that was shot here in Bermuda. Bermuda in 1914, and it was called Neptune's Daughter. And a lot of the scenes were actually shot right here at Anchor's Island in this white building you see there on the dock. Well, that was our very first aquarium. Our very first aquarium. Well, that movie that was shot here in Bermuda in 1914 reached worldwide headlines because of the near tragedy that occurred. The tank that they were filming in, it burst. And it sent the actors across the floor, but not before going over the edges of the glass, and they got cut up very, very badly. Very badly, yeah. Now, a lot of the artifacts that you see there, the pulley system, the cannon looking at us very ominously, that was actually unearthed in the 1990s when the then owner, Dr. James Martin, he bought the island. While we may not be familiar with his name, but we're definitely familiar with his work, he was one of the leading computer scientists in the world. As a matter of fact, he was ranked 4th out of the top 25. He made a lot of predictions pertaining to the role of computers in modern day society, and written over 300 books and articles on the very subject. He donated over $100 million to Oxford University in the UK. Why so much money? He felt that the 21st century was make or break for mankind. In a nutshell, we're going to hell in a handbasket, and it's up to computers to save the day. So he initially donated $60 million, and then he pledged another $50 million if it would have been matched, and needless to say, it was. Well, when he retired in the early 90s, he came here to Bermuda, and he bought this island here, and he built this beautiful home that you're going to see, and it was completed around 1997. Now, when you see the home, you're going to notice that it's a mixture on the left-hand side between Victorian architecture and on the right-hand side, there's old Bermuda architecture. Now, on the left-hand side, by Bermuda building codes and standards, it is 4 feet too high. And it is still 4 feet too high, which means one thing and one thing only. Money talks. Yes, money talks, yeah? Now, when you look at the right-hand side, you're going to notice that buttery. Yeah, you see that buttery thing again, that little triangle. Well, that's actually part of his kitchen. And he did a pretty cool thing one time. He had these reporters here, and he had them in that kitchen sitting on plexiglass chairs. Now, I know you're saying, well, that's not really cool, Robin. I mean, I'm with you. But what is cool is that they're in the plexiglass chairs, and the floor that they're sitting on is made out of glass. So they have this feeling of being suspended in the air. And underneath it gets cooler, because underneath the glass floor, it's an aquarium. Yeah, so you got fish and whatever swimming around. And under that, they're able to see into one of the caves. And there's quite a few caves around that island they're sitting on. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the dock there, just to the right of it, underneath the brush, you can see the opening to the very cave that they're able to see while they're sitting in his kitchen. Now, we had a lady on the tour about a year ago. She's Bermudian, and she had been in the house, and she was saying that it's actually a few areas in the house that have that glass floor and sort of look at it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. Unfortunately, in 2013, 6 years ago, approximately, actually June 2013, they found him here in the water in an unresponsive state. They believe he had a heart attack. Yeah. And since then, up until, let's say, 3 months ago, nobody really spoke about the island, but it was in the papers, like I said, 3 months ago. Why? Because his third wife is suing the government. Why is she suing the government? The government would not grant her a license to purchase the home. Yes. And there are very strict laws and rules, whatever, pertaining to and governing non-Bermudians purchasing property here in Bermuda. And first of all, you have to get a license if you're non-Bermudian to even be considered to purchase property and stuff like that. And I'll explain to you a little bit more about how that goes here. Well, the yellow house you see here to your left, that is owned by a gentleman by the name of Donald Mackenzie. Access to the rights of Pepsi Cola in South America. Unfortunately, only receives 1 lousy cent for every can of Pepsi Cola sold in South America. Yes. Now that house, believe it or not, was on the market for $14 million. Sorry? That's it. Yes, that's it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, he did not sell it. He was actually selling it because he was trying to downsize because all of his children are growing up, and he wanted to get something smaller. But he didn't sell it, but he's actually renting it out. Guess how much he gets per month? $25,000. $1,000 a month. Yeah, a month. Yeah. Yeah, you gotta love it. But as I was saying to you pertaining to non-Bermudians acquiring property, there are two caveats outside the license. First of all, it has to have an ARV, annual rental value, of over $153,000. And secondly, and more importantly, it cannot be bought from a Bermudian. You have to buy it from a non-Bermudian. And again, to protect what little space we do have, and to give you an idea, those house like that is going to start around about $3 million. Yeah, going to start one.
So nobody can buy a less than $1 million if you're not Bermuda.
Right, because the ARV would, yeah, it's all based on the ARV. Yeah. So it's nothing under 2.8 million. Now my favorite cottage on the entire tour is this white one you see here on the water side with the two chimneys. That is where Mark Twain stayed when he visited Bermuda. And he visited Bermuda quite often, as a matter of fact, between late 1800s and up until he died. I think he was here a few months right before he died. And he actually petitioned our government when they were introducing automobiles. He felt that it was going to ruin our tranquility. He preferred the old horse and buggy. But he has a very famous quote pertaining to Bermuda, and I paraphrase: when you all die, you go to heaven. When I die, I'm staying right here in Bermuda. Yeah. Now the pink house you see there, class, with the 4 chimneys, it is called 4 chimneys. You can work with me, people. Work with me, yes. 4 chimneys, yes. Well, that is owned by the Gibbons family, very wealthy family here in Bermuda. They own real estate all over the world. So David Gibbons, he was actually our premier in the early 70s. That's like our leader, our president. And at one time, he was the 6th wealthiest man in the British Commonwealth. And like I said, they own real estate all over the world, including in Times Square. And here in Bermuda, they own car dealerships, they own banks, they just own it. That boy, yeah. It's crazy. Got clothing stores, you name it. The Gibbons family has their hand in it. Yes. Now, as you can appreciate, again, us not having too much real estate. However, the early settlers did try to export a few things. One of those things they tried to export was onions. Now, for any Americans on here, I was just to stress that purple thing that they sell in the United States, calling that a Bermuda onion, that is not a Bermuda. That's not our onion, okay? Our onions are yellow and very sweet. Yeah, that purple thing that's not Bermuda onions, not at all. As a matter of fact, that our purple onion is the reason we no longer have an onion trade, because a guy from Texas, Texas, yes, a gentleman from Texas, yes, he ruined that for us. Yes. How you guys doing? Alrighty. And the other thing they exported were Easter lilies. And as a matter of fact, we sent Her Majesty the Queen a bouquet of Easter lilies every Easter. And we say that because we're coming into a place called Swansea Bay, and it gets its name from that White House you see there to your left with the green trim. That is known as Swansea. And that was owned by a gentleman by the name of General Russell Hastings. And he fought in the American Civil War. He was from the New England area. And when he retired, he and his wife, who was actually the niece of one of America's former presidents, Rutherford B. Hayes, they came here to Bermuda, and they exported Easter lilies to the United States, and primarily into New York. Yeah. I also like to use this house as an example. When you see that roof, you notice that roof is very smooth. Well, that's an indication that that's a very old house. And what the early settlers realized with that house, with that type of roof, when it rained, the water fell off too fast. So they were not able to capitalize on or maximize catching the water. So they had to think of a way of slowing the water down. So when you look around the majority of the other roofs, you see they had this sort of rippled effect. Well, that's what we call stamping of the slate. We call it slate, but it's actually made out of limestone. And it's basically just the overlapping of the tiles. And that way, when it rains, the water slows down and we're able to catch more water. Yeah. Now the blue house up there on the hill, that's an example of a house you're not drinking the water from. You see that roof? Yeah, you see that roof? We're not drinking from that house at all. But Captain Jamie said that's been looking like that for over 10 years. Does anyone? No, no one's done. Actually, it's boarded out. Actually, as a matter of fact, well, we heard our friend Mark, our other crew member, he was mentioning the other day that he heard that it's actually on the market for sale. It's actually owned by a family, the Gorms family, and they have a business in Bermuda called Gorms. Yes, you're with me. You're with me. Yeah. Well, they gave that to their grandsons. I guess where their grandsons live. Canada. Canada. Yes.
Hello.
How you doing? Yes, yay for Canada. Well, they did this tour one day, and we were coming across a cargo ship. But on that cargo ship, there was this boat, and we didn't think nothing of it until the next day we're doing this tour, and we saw that boat right here at Hamilton Princess, and then it dawned on us: somebody shipped their boat, yes, to Bermuda for America's Cup. It was here for about 8 weeks. And it was here definitely after the races are completed. And again, we're not talking about a small boat. This boat was at least 65, 70 foot boat. It was a big boat, but they shipped it into Bermuda. Yeah, crazy. They really wanted to be in a boat, right? I don't know. People dressed like my business at times here. Woo! Hang on. Yeah. Now, like I said, we are entering into our city, the city of Hamilton. This is actually our capital. It became our capital in 1815. The capital was previously in St. George's, but that was far down the east, but they moved it to a more central location. Now, what I'm about to say, for those that have been to Bermuda and those that have been shopping around, you're going to say, Robert, yes, we agree. And not that we want this title, not that we want it at all, but the city of Hamilton, it has the highest cost of living in the world. In the world. And how they come with those ratings, I should say, is they use New York City as a base, and they compare prices in terms of different things, logic, gas, and different things like that. And on an average, the prices in the city of Hamilton were close to 40 to 50% higher than they are in New York City. And with that said, Bermuda is, again, not that we want it, is the most expensive place to live in the world. And the number one reason for that is because we have to import everything. And I just saw a thing just the other day, and this really alarmed me. Bermuda's cost of living, and hold on to your hats, Bermuda's cost of living is 96% higher than in the United States. To give you an example, a loaf of bread is close to $7. Close to $7. A gallon of gas is close to $10 a gallon.
Wow.
Unbelievable. But very expensive, very expensive. That's why if you would all petition, work with me, I'm trying to get a raise. Speak to the boss. Captain, yes. Captain.
The whole island or just Hamilton?
No, the entire island, yeah. In terms of cities, this has the highest cost of living, and Bermuda is the most expensive place to live. Yeah, expensive place to live. But some things we get a bargain on. You know, I won't mention them on this tour, but some things we get a bargain on. Yeah. Sorry.
The watermelon on sale.
Yes. Tourism used to be our number one source of income. But I tell people all the time, we had a rocket scientist for a politician, and he considered you guys the hamburger crowd, the McDonald's crowd. And he didn't want the McDonald's crowd anymore. He wanted the caviar crowd. But they never showed up. So we lost, yeah. So exempt companies or international business, that's our main source of income. Like I said, no, we are in Hamilton. And as you can appreciate us being British, our official religion is the Anglican religion. And that cathedral you see in the back there, that is the Anglican Cathedral. Now that building serves as building restrictions for the buildings in the city of Hamilton. No building in the city of Hamilton can be taller than that or obstruct its steeples. Not at all. The U.S. Coast Guard. Now, as you go to the right of that, you're going to see the building with the two towers, and it has the clock. That is our House of Parliament. That's where our politicians make the laws and what have you. And that clock was donated to us in Bermuda when the Queen turned 50. For those that follow the monarch, that will be how many years ago? No? Well, she just went 93 in April, so 43 years ago. Yeah. And as you see all the containers here on the dock, this is our stevedore dock, and this is where I would say of the things that are imported, I would say close to 90% of the things that are imported have to come to this area right here. Is there a KFC on the island? Yes, it is. Yes, there is. There's one KFC on the island, and that is the only reason we have a KFC on the island because it got grandfathered in. Back in, I want to say in the early 70s, they passed a law that there would be no franchises in Bermuda. And actually, we had a premier that lost his shirt over that because he was trying to get a McDonald's here. Yeah, and his own part, and he was the premier. And he was the premier of Bermuda. He was the leader of Bermuda, and his own party did not support the, So that is the only food franchise, because we do have a few clothing franchises here, and we do have a few hotel franchises. But in terms of food, that is the only, as for those that are anyone into tennis? Any tennis people? No? Okay, no problem. Well, tennis was actually introduced to the United States via Bermuda. And from that house you see straight ahead of you with the Bermuda flag, that orange one, that is known as Claremont. And that house is Bermuda's first lawn tennis courts. Now, tennis, as we know it, was patented around 1873. Well, in 1874, there was a lady by the name of Mary Outerbridge. She was born in America, but her parents were Bermudian. And as a matter of fact, that was their home. And she came to visit her parents, and she saw these two guys playing this game she had never seen before. So she asked about it. They explained it to her, gave her the rules and regulations, a couple of rackets, and she took that to Staten Island Cricket Club in New York. And that's how tennis got to America. Now this road you see there with the traffic there, that wraps around the harbor, so it'll be known as thank you very much, Harbor Road. You get it. There you go. Free drink? Yeah, sure. Obviously, Harbor Road. Yeah. Well, the house you see up there on the hill with the black roof, you're probably saying, Robert, definitely don't want to drink from that house, but we do want to drink from that house because you know who owns that house? The Goslings. Yes, they do. The Gosling family. They own that house. Now, we believe that most likely they would have what we call an above-ground tank so that they get their fresh water. Well, they have an interesting story. They were